Hey folks, I see people are filtering in. That's great. Just FYI, we do have a recording going, standard procedure. We may upload this to our YouTube channel a little later. So don't be too alarmed. Feel free, of course, please do use the chat or Q&A function in Zoom, whatever is best for you, to ask questions. We'll probably take up Q&A closer to the end of the session, sort of circle back and try to gather up questions at the end. But if possible, I'll sort of take a few as we go as well. So yeah, we've got lots of folks coming in and lots of folks are registered. So yeah, we'll give it another minute or so. And then we'll get started. So yes, let's jump in. It's 7 o'clock. We have about 45 minutes, maybe 60 if we have quite a few questions. But let's dive in. So thanks again so much for joining us this evening. It's 7 o'clock in Toronto, and I am here with you to discuss scholarships. Scholarships Canada, finding and applying for scholarships. So a little bit about me. There I am. My name is Logan. I'm the managing editor here at Scholarships Canada. Bit about my background. Out of high school, I got an advanced technical diploma, very fancy, in film from Niagara College. And I worked as a video editor for several years. But I knew that I wanted to make my living with words. So I went back to school after a stint overseas, volunteering and so on. The sort of classic finding yourself thing, maybe. I went back to U of T and I earned an honors BA in linguistics, writing, and rhetoric. So I was able to do it at something of an accelerated pace, working through summers, taking extra courses wherever I could. In any case, 7 years of school or so takes its toll. Talking about tuition fees, I know a thing or two about student debt too. So that's just a little bit about me. I've been with Scholarships Canada now for a couple of years. We'll talk quickly about the value of post-secondary. These stats are a little old, out of date maybe, but the general trend certainly is going to stand true. The basic thread being that over the course of your career, you can expect to earn about $1 million more if you have an advanced degree. Now you are very likely to spend more money as well, so bear that in mind. And there are some caveats here too. Apprenticeship, we can see, sometimes outpaces other types of credentials, especially in sort of trades where workers are desperately needed, plumbers, electricians, that sort of thing. And even master's degree typically outpaces bachelor's too. So the further you go, generally, the more you're going to make. But it's not really just about money, and it's not necessarily just about getting the job either. Post-secondary in its sort of purest form, I guess, is about becoming a sort of more well-rounded person. Typically, grads have healthier habits. They're more like engaged civically. And we'll talk about maybe why that is, or some sort of tack-on effects about community participation and that kind of thing a little later. But in general, it's not just about job skills, but about being an active member of your society, being a sort of tuned-in person. Okay, some terms of art before we go too deep. I just want to define a couple of things, really basic words. Scholarship, in the most specific sense, is related to grades, accomplishments, right? I was top of the class, I got a scholarship. But we also use it as a generic term for school funding of all kinds. So when we say Scholarships Canada, we are using the more general sort of term, right? Funding for school. It says here, it may be renewable. This is one of the magic keywords I want you to keep an eye on. If you have a pen handy, renewable scholarships are something you really want to look for. Renewable scholarships, basically they'll pay you again and again each year. You keep your grades up, whatever else, generally it's decent grades. You maintain your eligibility, and in year 2, they're going to pay you again. Year 3, pay you again. This is really important. We'll talk a little bit more about it. So scholarships, bursaries. Bursary is based on financial need. That's it. Bursaries are for folks who need help paying for education. That's about it. They're sometimes renewable, not too often. Awards. Now, these are generally based on accomplishments, and we're thinking like medals, right? I placed first in track and field, I got an award. We also use it as something of a generic term. They're generally not renewable because it's a sort of one-time accomplishment type thing. And then finally, grants. Grants are almost always one-time, i.e. not renewable. And they are money that you do not have to pay back. Now, scholarships, bursaries, awards, you don't have to pay them back anyway. Grants are very specifically, this is money for you, it goes to you, and that's it. Grades, accomplishments, they're not too common. It's much more of a sort of higher level type of thing. Master's, PhD, people might get grants for research and so on. At the high school and sort of early undergrad level, college and uni, you're generally looking for scholarships and bursaries first and foremost. Okay, so we've defined some words. Let's dive in. How are you going to pay for everything? These are the general threads students typically need to pull on. And in most cases, it is A and B and C and D, right? Not necessarily just one of these items. Savings and work, this really depends on if you are in a position to hold down a part-time job and put some money away. Not everybody is in that position. So it's really going to depend. Family and parents, even more contextual, right? If you're in a position where your family is saving some coin and is willing to share it with you, then hey, great, why not, right? The bank of mom and dad has a long history. But again, not everybody is in that position. In fact, you may be in a spot where you have to support your parents. So being able to rely on family and folks, not often really realistic for a lot of students. Loans. So this is where we get into scarier territory because a loan you very much do have to pay back. That's the whole idea. There's a couple of different types. Student loan, of course, is the most common. They are generally from the province or federal government, sort of combo of both, depending on where you live in Canada. Student loans are great because sometimes they will give you some loan forgiveness. You don't have to pay it all back necessarily. And the repayment terms are more generous. You have more time. The interest rate is better from your point of view. So student loans, most people will need to take them. It's not a bad thing. Now, you can also go for bank loans or what they call student line of credit. This is a little bit dicier because while the terms are more favorable for students than like a payday loan, for example, a student line of credit is still going to be expensive in the end. You're going to have to pay it all back. So you may have to do that, but look for sort of student loans first if you can. Finally, scholarships and bursaries. This is the real magic that we're here to discuss, right? How do you get your hands on these puppies? So let's get into it. Okay, a bit more preamble, say. $1,000 doesn't seem like a ton in context of a $7,000 or $8,000 tuition bill. Maybe you've got $1,000 on top for books or lab supplies, that kind of thing. Plus you have living expenses if you're not living at home. So $1,000 scholarship in that context doesn't seem like much. But if you break it down, it can actually help you in a few different areas, like textbooks we mentioned, Metro Pass if you're on-campus student, right? Post-COVID, you're going back to school, you may need a bus pass. Phone bill, entertainment, like these are the kinds of things that are as important to student life as binders and pencils, right? Okay, some scholarship myths. So we have found that there are a few misconceptions that students have, parents, even guidance counselors around scholarships. And so I want to take a moment to dispel these myths and misconceptions because conceptualizing yourself as a scholarship winner is so important. We'll get into it. Okay, myth one, I don't have the marks. This is the first thing a lot of students think. Again, we conceive of a scholarship, it's for the valedictorian, right? It's for the rocket scientist in the class. Not necessarily. A lot of the awards that we index on Scholarships Canada don't ask about your grades at all. It's a minority that do. So the majority are interested in other factors. What are they? We'll get into it. Myth two, there is a lot of competition. This is a sort of yes and no type of thing. As you can see from the slide, almost 2/3 of our admins actually want more applications. That is, they're getting a few maybe, but not as many as they would like. Maybe it's not from the students they want. A small minority, small percentage here, get no apps at all. This is the real beauty. If you can find one of these, you happen upon it, and you are the only applicant, you may well win by default. So there is a lot of competition for some awards. Lots of awards that do not have that amount of competition. And even if they do have some people applying, odds are good that the admin actually wants a few more people. So why not throw your hat into the ring? Okay, myth 3, we're gonna do 5 of these, remember. Myth 3, only schools give scholarships. Definitely not the case. We have like 100K, 90,000, 100K awards on site. 10,000 of those or more are awarded by non-educational admins. This basically means companies, unions, associations, organizations, etc. Now, schools obviously do give scholarships to students who are attending them, but these other non-educational admins often don't care what school you're actually going to. So a corporation just wants to support a student in STEM, say, and you're taking STEM at Memorial University, great, all good. Okay, myth 4. Deadlines only in the spring, definitely not the case. We've crunched some numbers actually and found there are a couple of spikes in terms of deadlines throughout the year. October, surprisingly, being the #1. April is, I think, in second place. But more and more, we're seeing admins sort of shift deadlines into the summer as well, because students have more free time, right? You're generally going to be more able to apply to awards when you have a bit more time. So there are awards throughout the year. This is a good and bad thing because it means you need to sort of be paying attention throughout the year. There is no singular scholarship season where you just need to knuckle down and get it done. It's more like you need to kind of keep coming back. Anyway, we'll get into that too. And then myth 5, not in financial need. Only about 1/3 of the awards that we index ask about financial need at all. The real sort of trick to this is that financial need, quote unquote, is a broad, dare I say, nebulous term. Most admins won't actually have a firm definition. If you ask them what is financial need, they may not even really be able to tell you. Some folks will define it, and we'll talk about that briefly in a bit. But in most cases, it's, do you have a gap in your funding? Do you lack all of the money that you need to pay for school? And in most cases, that's going to be true. School's expensive, living is expensive, supplies are expensive. If you don't have a deep pockets, chances are you are in financial need anyway. Now, some admins will ask you to prove it, quote unquote, often by sharing like OSAP documents. So OSAP being the Ontario Student Assistance Program, which is student loans. They want to see your paperwork to show, yes, I am broke. So Ontario is going to give me 10 grand in a loan, right? Okay, that shows that you are in financial need. Again, this is not super common, but you may see it. Most cases, financial need is self-declared, and it's a sort of honor system thing. Okay, so quick recap of the 5 myths we just discussed. Scholarships not often based on marks. A lot of them are not. We'll talk about some of the bigger categories that do affect scholarships in a minute. A lot of admins want more applicants. More than just schools award scholarships. Deadlines are year-round. You don't necessarily need to be in financial need. You can't win if you don't apply. This one is a bit of a double-edged sword also, because it's the same line of reasoning that casinos use, right? You can't win if you don't play. There is a certain logic to that. It is kind of true in terms of scholarships, because you are putting in time upfront in the hopes of being rewarded later, as opposed to a more traditional sort of part-time job where you put in the time and you know for sure that paycheck is coming. Scholarships is not quite the same. So there is a bit more of a risk element. It's good to be aware of. And then finally, there's an award for you. That's really what I want to stress. I talked earlier about self-conception. We have a tendency, a lot of people do, to sort of talk ourselves out of things. The imposter syndrome, maybe you've heard. where, no, I don't deserve a scholarship. I didn't lead the chess club. I didn't run the student council. Like I'm not that kind of person, right? I want you to really sort of disabuse yourself of that notion. See yourself as a scholarship winner, somebody who is worthy, who is deserving. That self-talk, that self-conception is really powerful. So I would urge you, maybe it sounds a little silly, right? But do try to think of yourself as the scholarship recipient. I think that'll help. Okay, I'm going to take a quick moment here. Okay, we've got a question from Tony. Timing. Best time to apply for a 2024 graduate. Yeah, okay, Tony, I'm going to jump back to your question in a minute. We'll take some more questions at the end, but thank you for throwing that in the chat. I would urge others, if you have questions, please throw them in the chat and we'll try to get to them in the end. I want to take a few minutes just to cruise through 3 or 4 sample scholarships that are interesting for one reason or another. And the first being this retail education scholarship program. The beauty here is it is for folks with retail experience. If you've ever stocked a shelf or sold a shoe, you are going to probably qualify for one of these awards. Now, they do ask for a reference letter and an essay. We'll talk about how you can kind of get those done easily and quickly later in the show. Otherwise, they're not interested in financial need, all years of study, that's key, right? You could be in your final year and still apply for this. Doesn't care if you're in college or university, doesn't care what your grades are, right? The beauty is they care only about your work experience. What was being in retail like for you? So this one's pretty cool. I worked at a No Frills back in the day, so wish I had known about this at that time. It's closed right now. It's going to reopen in January, so before you know it. Okay, this one is open right now. This is pretty sweet too. It's open to graduating high school students who are heading to uni next year. So this is going to be perhaps a significant portion of this crowd might be eligible for this. Now, it does ask about financial need, and they actually do define it. So I mentioned most admins do not. This one actually does. Your family needs to make $65,000 or less, which is not a lot of money, admittedly. You've got to have decent grades, but when we say decent, 65%, right? Nothing stellar necessarily. What they're really interested in is entrepreneurial skills plus community service. Community service is huge. You're going to see that again and again. The entrepreneurial bit is a bit more unique. This is the entrepreneurial scholarship, of course. And there are 10 awards a year worth 10 grand, plus they are, say it with me, renewable. That is, again, one of those keywords you want to keep an eye out for, right? So if you are in the small business, maybe you're a graphic design freelancer, sourcing commissions through Instagram, like it could be that, right? That is entrepreneurial. Apply for something like this. It's open now and it's going to close in March. So, I mean, why not? Okay, a couple more I want to talk on. This TD scholarships, this is going to be much more circumscribed. It's open to members of the FNMI community, Indigenous broadly, but otherwise is pretty sweet for 2 years or more. So if you're in college just for a couple of years, it's all good. 60K over 4 years, it's renewable. You could get $15,000 or $20,000 a year. Like it's amazing. The deadline is closing soon. I just wanted to pitch this in case we do have any Indigenous folks on the line. Would be worth looking into. Okay, final one here. This is from MTA. So the previous ones we've looked at have been not school specific, right? These have been sort of non-educational admins. This final one is from a school, and it's an example of what we call an entrance award. This is from Mount Allison. It is for outstanding high school grads. It's worth $12,000 a year and it's renewable for your whole degree, plus it pays an internship. So pretty significant program, especially in terms of getting paid to get work experience. Now it's a pretty big application. It wants 3 reference letters plus an essay, and they're not going to tell you what the essay topic is until you've applied, which is kind of unusual. You don't often see that. And finally, it's talking about leadership, volunteer, and community service. These are 3 keywords we are going to come back to again and again and again. But so these are a couple of scholarships that you might see, right? Depending where you look. So we've talked quite a bit about what you are looking for. How do you actually start? So this is, I want to go through this pretty thoroughly. When you are starting your search for scholarships, you want to do almost like a self-inventory, kind of go through, who am I, what am I about, right? And even make some notes, right? It never hurts. Field of study, very big factor. This is going to be important in most cases. We are in a STEM dominant tide in history right now in Canada. STEM is everything. So if you're in a position where you're trying to decide, what do I study? Do I study biochemical engineering or do I study contemporary poetry? You're really torn, and the only thing that's going to make that decision for you is who's going to give me a scholarship. Well, you are going for biochem. You're going to end up a biochemist. Not that there are no scholarships for contemporary poets, but they are not nearly as numerous. So the field that you are interested in is going to, in most cases, be a big factor. Your study, this is going to be a factor too. There are many more scholarships for entering students, first years, than there are for final years, graduating students. This is just the way of the world. Universities, colleges are competing with one another to encourage you to come to them, right? So they will try to incentivize you in your first year, second year. And that's why we stress renewability. If you can find an award that is renewable, then you can take a ton of pressure off yourself. As your academics are getting more challenging in third, fourth year, you can more or less rely on a stable source of funding, right? Maybe it's not perfect necessarily, but it's something, it's renewable. There are awards for graduating students, for last year students and so on, of course, but they're not so common. We'll talk about how to find them in a minute. Activities, this is huge, and we've talked on a couple of these already. Now, scholarships in the public consciousness are often related to like American media, right? I'm going to Penn State on a football scholarship. We don't have too much of that in Canada. Our sports scene at the post-secondary level is just not nearly as strong or well-funded. So you'll find sports scholarships, but not so many. Other activities that you might see include like religious stuff. If you're part of a faith community, chances are you may qualify for scholarships based on that. Academics is straightforward, but I want to draw your attention to these big ones: leadership, community involvement, and the volunteer experience. These three are going to be, you're going to see them again and again, and we've already seen an example or two. And again, this is somewhat more modern. Newer scholarships, newer admins are moving in this direction. What they want to see is that you are a tuned in person who is engaged with their community, who has their eyes open, that you're paying attention, that you give a shit, right? Basically. Somebody who sees the world and says, no, we can do better. Now, I want to stress that leadership, community involvement, volunteer experience, they do not have to be three distinct prongs, right? They can be tied together. These are related. And especially when we say leadership, we don't necessarily mean president of the student council, right? You don't have to be elected to anything. You don't have to like run a club to be considered a leader, to have demonstrated and built leadership skills. You can do this by assessing a need in your school. Maybe you want to start an anime club because you want to watch anime with fellow anime nerds, and that's great, right? That's leadership. Maybe you have gone out of your way to offer to keep scores or times for your school's swim team, right? You're demonstrating leadership capabilities here. Community involvement, this might mean your school community, yearbook club, prom committee, whatever. Might also mean helping out at the old folks' home, or could even mean like volunteering with a political campaign, frankly. It's getting you out of the house and engaged with something that's going on around you. When I say out of the house, I don't necessarily mean that literally. You can do virtual volunteering, virtual community involvement is all good. That is fine. Now, a question we often get about this is, how many hours of volunteer do I need? Do not think about it in terms of hours. People who read your application don't care that you worked 40 or 45 hours or 55 hours. They care about how the experience shaped you. What did you learn out of it? And what good did you do? What impact did you have on the community that you were serving, right? What did you learn? What did they learn? That sort of thing. Rather than I did 100 hours, look at me. Okay. We're doing well. I see we've got quite a few questions piling up. Thank you, folks. Keep them coming. We're getting through the show and we'll go through them pretty quickly. Academic average, bottom, straightforward. Some admins will look at grade 11 grades. Some may look at grade 12. Not much you can do about that. Where to start beyond the ones we've talked about already? Heritage is a big one, depending. We already saw an example of a scholarship for Indigenous students. If you're of Chinese descent, Polish, I've seen Norwegian, I've seen all sorts of stuff. So depending on your background, excuse me, you may have an angle there to consider. Affiliation, this is a good one I'll spend a moment on. By affiliation, we mean companies, unions, religious groups that you or your family are affiliated with. When we say family, we mean mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, maybe. Not so much like aunts and uncles, typically. So just to give an example from my own background, when I was in high school, I worked at a No Frills, right? I mentioned that in the retail bit. So No Frills is a union workplace. The union I was in offered scholarships to employees. Great, that's one. Loblaws, who owns No Frills, also had a scholarship program. So there's two. Beauty, that's just me. My dad at that time worked at Coca-Cola, also a union workplace, and Coca-Cola also offered scholarships to kids of employees. So that was 4 angles I had right there just from my own part-time job and my dad's job. So think about, companies, unions, and so on that you and your mom and dad, grandma, grandpa might be affiliated with. Military experience could be something like that. So yeah, do a little digging. If they don't offer a scholarship and you're super brave, maybe ask them why. Maybe they'll set one up, you never know. Personal circumstances, these are things that are more indelible, that you wouldn't or couldn't change if you wanted to. amputee, LGBTQ status would be under here. Maybe you're a parent or a mature student, that kind of thing. Financial need, we talked on that. Check with the scholarship admin for more details. I guess that's worth mentioning. If you're really not sure, it's not a bad idea to reach out. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then location, where you live and go to school. And also where you're from, I'll add that. Just one more example, little town of Chatham in Ontario here, back when I was going to school at least, offered a scholarship of I think $1,000 to somebody from Chatham who is going to post-secondary this year. It was like community sourced, right? So maybe your town has something similar. If not, maybe they'd start one up if you ask nicely. Okay, so we've talked a lot about different factors, what to look for, what to consider. It's a lot to juggle. We do our best with modern tech, right, to make it easier for you with the get matched tech. So I'm going to talk about that really briefly. The way it works is you set up a profile. It's like social media. It's going to ask you a bunch of questions, including a bunch of these: heritage, field of study, activities, and so on. And it will do its very best to match you. So we can see on the right here, you're matching scholarships. It's just a list of awards sorted by upcoming deadline that may fit with you in one way or another. Tells you how much money they are, what school they're for, et cetera, et cetera. So the more you fill out your profile, the more you experiment with your matches, the more awards you'll get to explore. Now, I want to caution you that not everything that you match to is going to actually be eligible for you, right? You're still going to need to put some legwork in. The idea is just to give you a short list so that you're not faced with 10,000 awards. You can start with, okay, I've got 40 to go through. At least you've got somewhere to start. We also offer subscriptions. I'll briefly touch on this. Myself and my colleague write newsletters often. They're great. I'll plug that. But really the red thing here is what I want to draw your attention to, and that is scholarship deadline alerts. The beauty of this is it is a monthly email that tells you, hey, you've got scholarship X, Y, and Z are closing in the next month. Maybe you want to swing back and check them out. That's really all it is. We talked about scholarship season, deadline season doesn't really exist. So if you're not in the habit of hitting the site regularly, the deadline alerts are handy because they come directly to you. Not a bad deal. Matching scholarships, yeah, we touched on this already. You can save them, nix them, and so on. Click through to get more details. You can search and refine your results. I won't say too much on this. We've all used websites before. Mess around with your filters to get different results. Okay, general tips. This is some broad advice, and then we'll do a couple of FAQs, and then we'll get to your real live questions in just a sec. Getting motivated, we touched on this. There's a time element, time sink element. You want to generally treat your scholarship search more like a part-time job or even like going to the gym rather than treating it like cramming for an exam the night before. I hope that analogy kind of makes sense. Basically slow and steady, a little bit over the course of a long period rather than trying to jam it all in one little narrow window. Invest your time a few hours per week. That's ambitious. I would say if you're doing even an hour a week, that's probably plenty. But the basic idea being that you should be checking in regularly, right? Again, going to the gym, not cramming for an exam. Scholarships Canada touched on that. Understand the requirements. Have questions, contact the award admin. This is good advice in general, good life advice, frankly. If you have questions, ask them. Pretty much that's the long and short of it. Even if you're fairly sure you know the answer or you have a pretty good sense, I know what they're going to say, ask anyway. Schools, school admins, some scholarship admins, but definitely schools with like competitive programs, highly subscribed competitive programs, have what they call demonstrated interest. And this is a behind the scenes metric that is basically this student checked in. We know who they are. They asked a question, they attended a tour, they nudged us on social media, like whatever it is, right? They've interacted with us somehow. I'm not saying that this is going to be the clincher for whether you do or do not receive a scholarship. Like, you know, it's not an edge case type thing. Really what I want to convey is that asking questions, reaching out, confirming your understanding is a good way to build rapport with anyone, scholarship admin or not. So if you have questions, reach out, always a good idea. A few more smaller awards, less competition, basically true. A lot of people will chase some of the big awards, trying to get that $10,000, $100,000 payday. Good on them if they can, but if they're leaving the $500, the $1,000, the $750 on the table, all the better for you to come and sweep them up, right? Sweep them up. So generally, you should be applying for smaller awards, even if you never heard of the admin, you're not sure what they're about, it's probably worth applying. Being prepared, having your documents on hand. We'll cover this in, more detail in just one second. But basically, these are the documents you're generally going to need: reference letter, personal statement / essay, cover letter, which is kind of the same thing, and then a resume. We'll talk on this in just a second. And then don't give up. We touched on this as well. This is that inherent risk factor, right? You can't win if you don't apply type thing. It's like applying for jobs. You're not necessarily going to get the first one that you apply for. It can be a drag, especially if you're really counting on it. Again, don't get too like personally attached, right? It's just business, as it were. So try not to be discouraged, get back on the horse, that kind of thing. Okay, boilerplate documents. So how do you apply for a bunch of awards that all want reference letters and essays and stuff? Well, short answer is you do one version that you then tweak as needed for all other applications. So we call this a boilerplate. Boilerplate is a template, essentially. You're going to want one of each of these three. A resume, 1 page is all you need. I've read a lot of resumes. People don't read them, they scan them, right? They don't want to spend a lot of time on it, frankly. So if you can get your resume into 1 page, great. Personal statement, about 500 words. You can write your personal statement today. As soon as we jump off this call, you could sit down and write something, even though you don't know what scholarship you're applying for yet. I can tell you how. Almost always when it is a personal statement, an essay, a cover letter type thing, a lot of the time, The topics they want are, who are you? What are your goals? What would receiving this scholarship mean to you? What would receiving this scholarship mean to your community? If you can essentially distill these 4 related topics into a compelling personal statement of about 500 words, generally probably shouldn't go further than that, 500, you're pretty much set. You're going to have a personal statement that you can use for all sorts of scholarships, even maybe school applications, depending. Now, you do need to tweak these. If the scholarship is not asking who you are, what you're about, don't write on that. You have to be responsive to the prompt. But the basic idea is most essays are about who are you, what are your goals, what would receiving mean to you, what would receiving mean to your community. I would urge you also to use personal flavor, color, bring some of your character to your piece, right? Don't scrub it of everything that makes you you. Include some of your natural speaking voice. Nothing worse than artificial academies. Write how you speak. Okay. Finally, references. 2 is a good number. We already saw a scholarship app that required 3. 2 is generally good. Maybe you'll want 3, depending. Generally, you want 1 academic, 1 personal, but you don't want like mom and dad or your best friend. Somebody who knows you in a professional-ish context is best. And then customize these docs, of course. We touched on that. Scholarships, tips, and FAQs. Yeah, you'll sort of find all this on Scholarships Canada. Social media, it's beautifully curated. If you don't want to hit the site regularly, you can just get it in your Insta feed. School Finder, quick plug on this. This is our sister site. If you're looking for schools and programs, this is the one. Same login, same profile and all that. It'll try to match you to schools and programs and give you all of the details you need to compare them. So that can be handy. There are events up there as well. We are at an event right now, as it were. So I won't spend too much time on this. FAQs. Okay, so this is the last thing I want to cover before we start taking live questions, because some of these come up again and again. When should I apply? Okay. Most of the time, this is after accepting an offer of admission. Most scholarship admins expect that you are enrolled in school, or at the very least, accepted to be enrolled. Once you've accepted your offer of admission, or at least received one, you can generally start applying for most awards. Now, there are some exceptions that may be based on age, like it's for 16 to 25-year-olds, say, or it's even explicitly for students who are in high school. If that's true, great, go ahead and apply. 9 times out of 10, though, you're going to need to be like on the path to a college or uni to be able to apply for those awards. Okay, awards for people in the trades, yes, for sure, though the incentive structure is different here in Ontario, at least, from other types of post-secondary, so there are not so many awards. They do exist, but there are fewer. You want to generally look for awards at the diploma or even certificate level, apprentices, and so on. How many scholarships can I apply to and receive? Unlimited in most cases. A given organization may say you can only win 1 award from us, but that's not going to affect the organization next door. So most of the time, go apply as much as you can. Highest value scholarships. Canada doesn't have much in the way of full ride awards where everything is covered. They do exist. Some of the biggest awards in the country include Loran, TV scholarships for community leaders, and the Schulich Leader Scholarships. Again, notice leadership, community, right? These again and again, we see it. These are like 50 grand, 100 grand, major competition. If you've cured cancer already, you're probably a good candidate. Can I defer a scholarship? Yes and no. Really depends. When in doubt, reach out. Always ask questions. And finally, scholarships for international students. Yes, if we have any folks from outside of Canada, and by that I mean non-Canadian citizens or permanent residents, you're going to be considered an international student. International fees are super high, and the scholarships are much less common and harder to get typically. So if you're an international student, you're going to be, it's just going to be harder on you, frankly. The scholarships do exist, but they are rather competitive. There's a lot of people trying to get them, and they are often more focused on grades than leadership, volunteer, some of that stuff. So if you got really good grades, you're in good shape. Okay, next steps. This really depends where you are. If you're in grade 11, you're on the build your resume track. That means volunteer, meaning not hours, as we discussed, leadership, community, and then grades if you can scrape it. Grade 12, now you're starting to apply. It's sort of application season right now. You're applying for uni or college. Once you've got a couple of offers in hand, you can start applying for entrance awards, folks just out of high school, that kind of thing. If you're already in college and university, look at clubs, associations, check with your financial aid office, and check with your department too. If you're in, for example, the English department, they probably do have awards for English students in second, third year. So check in with them, see what's available. Financial aid office is generally your best bet. Okay, pop quiz, t-shirt cannon time. No t-shirt cannon. This is a virtual event, I'm sorry to say. So we're on the thank you part. I guess I'll leave it here. We've got quite a few questions and not enough time. So I'll thank you right off the bat. And now let's jump back and do our best to answer some questions. So if you have some, thanks for your time. Really appreciate you joining us this evening. Good luck on your scholarship search, and otherwise stick around for some Q&A. Okay, Tony had an issue with security. Not too sure about that. Thanks for pointing it out. Best time for a 2024 graduate to be applying for scholarships. I think we've kind of covered that. I hope we have. If you're graduating high school in 2024, you are in the building your resume stage. It's probably too soon to apply for scholarships. Sport-related scholarships, specifically around baseball, I'm going to go on a limb and say yes, for sure. I don't know them offhand, but I've seen enough sports scholarships for weird sports too that you've never heard of, like a ringette. So yeah, you'll find some baseball stuff. Mary weighed in a little bit. Thank you for that. Cynthia is having fishing bit too. Okay, so maybe a security question on the site. I'll look into that after the session. I haven't seen that before though. Okay, more like chat. Thanks very much, folks, for weighing in on the chat. Yeah, really appreciate it. A question from Yvette about working solo parents. Yeah, for sure. I've seen awards for single parents, not necessarily specifically single parents in the workforce, though that may exist as well. Claudia, the first scholarship was the Retail Education Scholarship Program, something to that effect, retail education. Question from Yahya, can I explain more about renewable scholarships? Yeah, so renewable means that if you qualify to receive it the first time, first year, for example, and you keep your grades up or you stay in the chess club because it's a chess club scholarship or whatever, keep your eligibility, you will continue to get funding in year 2, 3, 4. The idea being that the funding is renewed. Hopefully that helps. Question from Nife, what if your community involvement, leadership, and volunteer experience happened abroad? All good. Yeah, that's fine. MTA scholarship means you have to study in their university. Yes, good question. If a scholarship comes from a school, like that MTA one we looked at, it is going to be tenable only at that school. So part of the scholarship thing is a marketing effort, right? MTA is trying to build their name, encourage students to come, so they offer this scholarship to get students to come. Wouldn't really make sense for them to fund somebody who goes elsewhere. Any scholarship for international students for postgraduate studies? Yes, but again, more rare. Postgrad scholarships in general are more rare. Awards for international students are more rare. You may be able to use ScholarshipsCanada. They have some like government scholarships for postgrad students in particular. That might be able to help you, but otherwise, yeah, you're going to need to do some digging for sure. Scholarships for international students for high school, pretty much no. I've never really seen that. Scholarships for high school are effectively unheard of. You may be a high school student going on to post-secondary. There'll be scholarships for that, but not to pay for high school in particular. I hope that helps. Why does it suggest not applying to one's? Sorry, Catherine, I'm not sure. If scholarships have no applicants, Yeah, it's hard. I'm sorry, Catherine, I don't really understand your question. Feel free to rewrite it though. Jumping ahead, for Sue, a particular general format for reference letters that can be used for any and all scholarships. Yeah, I mean, if you look up sample reference letters online, or even in the tips section on Scholarships Canada, we have some examples there. Yeah, there's not like a standard format. It's just a sort of simple letter, really. Hey, I am so-and-so. I know person X from when they did Y, and they're great because Z. Like, that's essentially it. Do reference letters have to be from school, can be from community service members, etc.? Definitely from community, religious figures, your coach, like whatever, your boss at your part-time job. It's not easy to get references when you have to send a link and expect teachers to write for universities. They do not have time. Yeah, it's an interesting point. You definitely don't want to leave it too late. If you say, hey, I need a reference letter and I need it tomorrow, too bad for you. You want to give multiple weeks ahead, and you generally want to ask somebody who you have some semblance of a relationship with. If they get your request and they say, who's this? That's not ideal. Mary, yes, we will share the recording to anybody who signed up. Great, Chris shared a link on reference letters, perfect. Offer information for Canadian students to get US scholarships. Yeah, I mean, they do exist. We don't have so many on Scholarships Canada because we're typically focused on the Canadian market. They do exist. I know there are even a couple of states like Florida that have reduced tuition for Canadian students. So I would check out educationusa.com probably. They'll have a lot of info specifically for Canadian students to go to the US. Another question, full ride scholarships closed. Yeah, most full rides sort of don't exist. The Loran Schulich ones we covered, I'm not totally sure right now. But yeah, they get a ton of applications. Loran TD gets 6,000. Yeah, so exactly, tons of competition. Cynthia, is there understanding for grade 12s not having much volunteer hours due to pandemic? Yeah, so that's a good question too. There is a bit of that leeway, if you will, recognizing that the world's been kind of messed up the last few years. So yeah, there's a bit of wiggle room there. There are online volunteer type things, but yeah, it's not too big a deal. Really, you just want to avoid the I just sat in my room for 2 years type thing, ideally. Okay. Yeah, jumping ahead, lots of questions. If a student is going to the States to play a sport, would they still qualify for a scholarship from Canada? Good question. It's gonna really depend. In most cases, yes. But again, if it's a scholarship from a school and you're going to study in the States, you can't take that with you. But if you got the Loran Award, for example, you may well be able to take it. Provincial student loans also. Now, most awards, all awards, are going to say where they're eligible. In a lot of cases, it's any school, they don't care, or it's any school in Canada, or it's any school in Canada or the US. So just be sure you're looking at the scholarship details to figure out if you actually can take it over the border. For references, how custom do they have to be? Can they be more generic? They can definitely be generic. I would encourage you to get generic ones. It's not a big deal if it says, dear Scholarship X committee, please accept blah, blah, blah. And you submit it to Scholarship Y, that doesn't really matter. Nobody really cares about that. But if it just says, dear Scholarship committee, maybe that's better. Generic is not bad. Fast web, yeah, that's a good one too. It is sort of like Scholarships Canada, but very much US based. Share the recording. Yeah, we will share the recording via email, probably tomorrow. Going to chill after this. Scholarships for grade 10 and 11 students. We sort of touched on this. Not really, I'm afraid. Scholarships around lifeguarding. Haven't actually specifically seen lifeguard in some time, maybe once back in the day. I don't have any offhand, but I would guess you probably could find one. If I receive a large scholarship that pays for my whole university education, will I be able to turn down the other scholarships? Yeah, so if you, in you've got a good problem to have and you receive more money than you need, you can turn stuff down. In most cases, they'll let you take it anyway. Really going to depend. Again, when in doubt, reach out. Classic. A couple of links there. That's great. Some sites that appear to no longer offer scholarships, to ask if they still continue. Does it look bad to send them an email and jump right into asking? I don't think that's bad personally. Cold calls can be, well, cold emails can be awkward for some people. It depends on your own personal temperament. But if, such and such law firm used to offer a scholarship and this year they don't, and you reach out and say, hey, like I saw this once, what happened? That's not really going to offend anybody. I wouldn't worry about that. I wouldn't worry about looking bad. If anything, it's that demonstrated interest bit, right? You are somebody who is paying attention. You're somebody who cares. That's generally considered positive. Okay, a few more. Are part-time paid activities like refereeing considered community service? Kind of, sort of. Yeah, refereeing younger sports, that definitely has the stink of community service to it. Getting paid is not the worst thing in the world, right? A lot of students don't have the financial status to be giving work away for free. They need to work, right? Scholarship admins do respect that. So if you say, hey, I've been serving my community as a paid part-time ref for little kids sports, great, that's fine. Yeah, okay, Tony, that's really weird. We'll look into that. I'm sorry that you're getting like a warning. Schulich scholarship mean we have to attend York U? Good question. No, the Schulich, it's the same namesake, but two different things. The Schulich is rich as hell. They have supported all sorts of things, including the York Business School and the leadership scholarships over here. I can understand how you might make that connection, but they are actually distinct in this case. Maybe an issue with the site. Yeah, okay, thanks. Answering questions on the Q&A as well. Yes, I'm going to jump over there in a second. Schulich open to all students. The school can nominate only one student. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Schulich is nomination based. Probably should have mentioned this. I only mention it because it's a big award, but your school actually has to nominate you. Great, Andy offered a lifeguard recommendation. Perfect. Okay, that's it for chat questions. Keep them coming. I've got a few more Q&A type questions though. I'm going to jump back. Received an offer of admission to a university, but haven't accepted it. Does that qualify me for scholarships with the condition of acceptance into a university? Good question. I hope you're still here to hear this. Yes, in most cases, if you have received an offer, it is essentially the same as you having accepted that offer. Now, if you end up turning it down, then that's not good. But if you received an offer, you can apply for scholarships that say, yes, you're enrolled. Hopefully that helps. Paid activities like refereeing, yeah, we touched on that. Scholarships for visible minority students. Yes, we actually have a section or sort of a category for that on Scholarships Canada, but it's not working properly. Short answer though, yes, for sure. We touched on this a bit with Heritage. There are scholarships for Black students, for example, scholarships for Indigenous students, right? Really depends. Entrepreneur, family business volunteer work, also considered volunteer work. Yeah, you could probably spin it that way, right? I volunteered my time helping with my family business because they desperately need my help, right? I think that's fine. Student going to the States, yeah, we talked on that. Medical conditions such as fibromyalgia, celiac, severe phobia account for some disability or handicap when applying for a scholarship. Really going to depend. That's a when in doubt, reach out type of question. I'm not sure. I think fibromyalgia would count as a disability. And I only say that because my mom suffers it. So I have a familiarity. Celiac, severe phobias, those I don't really have much familiarity with. So I would defer to the admin to confirm. Yeah, we talked on that. Will a recording be available? For sure. Scholarships have regional restrictions, or can people from all across Canada apply for all scholarships? Good question. Yes, lots of awards have regional restrictions, lots, in fact. It may be that you need to be from Ontario to qualify, or you need to be studying in Ontario to qualify, or you need to be from New Brunswick or whatever, right? Yes, definitely true. More about renewable scholarships. Yeah, I covered that again. Pays you year in, year out, as long as you continue to qualify. share the link to your site. Yeah, it's scholarshipscanada.com, scholarshipscanada.com. If you Google Scholarships Canada, it'll probably be first result. And final question, it looks like, from Yaya, are there scholarships specifically for online schools? This is an interesting one. I'm going to basically say no. Reason being, most online schools, or that at least are going to be eligible for scholarships, also offer in-person, or it is like a recognized college or university, right? If your school is online only, it may not, it may not be considered like a certified institution in some cases. Like, it's really going to depend. But scholarships specifically for online schools, I haven't really seen that. I'd be interested to see them though, if so. Yeah, a couple of more questions here have pulled in. Ideal community service and leadership activities. Community service, classic is visiting the elderly in the retirement home, right? Friendly visits, they call them. Leadership could be starting a club at school. It could be volunteering to keep score at a sports game. Like, you don't have to be a true like president to be demonstrating leadership. Maybe you started up a D&D game and you run D&D for your friends once a week, right? That shows leadership. Scholarship deadline prior to UAC deadline, can you still apply? Yes, for sure. In most cases you can. You'll just need to be able to show later that you are accepted to a school. Scholarships for students with learning disabilities, yes, for sure. I know I have seen that. You may want to check out Julie Neads, NEADS.ca, I think it is. It is an association specifically for scholarships for disability folks, learning and otherwise. So hopefully that'll help. And Mary, yeah, trying to get scholarships, it's tough. I have heard stories from folks who applied for like 3 awards and they got 30 grand. So it almost feels like a crapshoot sometimes. All you can do is try. So on that note, I want to thank you again for your time this evening. Always enjoy talking scholarships, so appreciate you spending a bit of time this evening. We are definitely over time, so check out Scholarships Canada. Thanks again, everybody, and have a very fine evening. Thank you all.